Greetings. We are going to have another episode in a month of Mojoism. And this time we are reading from Jean Toomer's book called Cain. I don't know how well known this book is. I was introduced to it while I was at Fisk. But while I was there, my primary instructor was the illustrious Dr. Leslie, oh my goodness, I can't remember his last name. It just escaped me that quickly. Oh my goodness, his name will not come back to me. Anyway, he was a contemporary of many of the Harlem Renaissance writers. And so a lot of the Harlem Renaissance work that I am familiar with comes from his introduction to it. So Jean Toomer is one of the writers that I was introduced to under his tutelage. Dr. Collins. Yeah, I was about to try to type it in and then it just came to my mind. So Dr. Leslie Collins was my primary teacher at Fisk. He was the primary teacher of what we called at that time Negro Lit. And since that was my area of concentration, he was one of my primary teachers. So under his tutelage, I had the opportunity to be introduced to many of the Harlem Renaissance works that I'm not sure, how obscure they are, is what I'm saying. So Cain is a book by Jean Toomer. Jean Toomer took a pilgrimage throughout the South, and he wrote about the things that he saw. And what touched me about this book from the first time I read it was the way that he described Black women. I thought it was exceedingly beautiful. Jean Toomer, I believe, was a gay mixed race man. I think one of his parents was Black and one of his parents was white. But I may be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But the way that he wrote about Black women, the descriptions that he used of them, I found to be very beautiful. When I was introduced to this type of literature, I had not had the luxury of hearing us written about. So many of the things that were said, it was my first time hearing that type of description of Black women, and it moved me. It made me feel good. So I'm going to read the first chapter of Cain to you. And the first chapter of Cain is entitled Corintha. Her skin is like dusk on the eastern horizon. Oh, can't you see it? Oh, can't you see it? Her skin is like dusk on the eastern horizon when the sun goes down. Men had always wanted her, this Corintha. Even as a child, Corintha carrying beauty perfect as dusk when the sun goes down. Old men rode her hobby horse up on their knees. Young men danced with her at frolics when they should have been dancing with their grown-up girls. God grant us youth, secretly prayed the old men. The young fellows counted the time to pass before she would be old enough to mate with them. This interest of the male, who wishes to ripen a growing thing too soon, could mean no good to her. Corintha at 12 was a wild flash that told others what it is to live. At sunset, when there was no wind, and the pine smoke from over by the sawmill hugged the earth, and you couldn't see more than a few feet in front, her sudden darting past you was a bit of vivid color, like a blackbird that flashes in light. With the other children, one could hear, some distance off, their feet flopping in the 2-inch dust. Corintha's running was a whir. It had the sound of the red dust that sometimes makes a spiral in the road. At dusk, during the hush, and just after the sawmill had closed down and before any of the women had started singing their supper getting ready songs, her voice, high-pitched and shrill, would put one's ears to itching. But no one ever thought to make her stop because of it. She stoned the cows, beat her dog, and fought the other children. Even the preacher who caught her at mischief told himself that she was as innocently lovely as a November cotton flower. Already, rumors were out about her. Homes in Georgia are most often built on the two-room plan. In one you cook and eat, in the other you sleep. And there love goes on. Corintha had seen or heard or perhaps had felt her parents loving, and one could but imitate one's parents, for to follow them was the way of God. She played home with a small boy who wasn't afraid to do her bidding, and that started the whole thing. Old men could no longer ride her hobby horse up on their knees, but young men counted faster. Her skin is like dusk. Oh, can't you see it? Her skin is like dusk when the sun goes down. Corintha is a woman, she who carries beauty perfect as dusk when the sun goes down. She has been married many times. Old men remind her that a few years back they rode her hobby horse up on their knees. Corintha smiles and indulges them when she is in the mood for it. She has contempt for them. Corintha is a woman. Young men run steals to make her money. Young men go to the big cities and run on the road. Young men go away to college. They all want to bring her money. These are the young men who thought that all they had to do was count time. But Corintha is a woman, and she has had a child. A child fell out of her womb onto a bed of pine needles in the forest. Pine needles are smooth and sweet. They are elastic to the feet of rabbits. A sawmill was nearby. Its pyramidal sawdust pile smoldered. It is a year before one completely burns. Meanwhile, the smoke curls up and hangs in odd wraiths about the trees, curls up and spreads itself out over the valley. Weeks after Corintha returned home, the smoke was so heavy that you tasted it in the water. Someone made a song. Smoke is on the hills, rise up. Smoke is on the hills, oh rise and take my soul to Jesus. Corintha is a woman. Men do not know that the soul of her was a growing thing, ripened too soon. They will bring her their money. They will die not having found it out. Corintha at 20, carrying beauty, perfect as dusk when the sun goes down. Corintha. Her skin is like dusk on the eastern horizon. Oh, can't you see it? Oh, can't you see it? Her skin is like dusk on the eastern horizon when the sun goes down. Goes down. Jean Toomer, Cain. This is our installation for today of a month of Mojoism. Peace, y'all.